How you doing, guys? Today we're going to have a bunch of little projects completed on the 857, one of which is the completion of the relocation of the battery. As in my prior video, I was going to relocate the battery underneath the seat pan or the fender tray or whatever you want to call this, and that's exactly what I've done. What I've specifically did is I took my die grinder with a nice thin cutoff wheel and I just made the notches in order to allow the battery to completely fit into the battery tray. There it is. You can actually see that I have the battery tray loosely bolted in, and then I made the appropriate notches. I calculated out that it really needed 3/16 of an inch of a notch on either side, splitting the difference. And I actually made it 5/16 so that way I could have a little bit more room. I want to put a piece of vacuum hose right along this edge just so the plastic battery has a little protection against this steel. And I think if you really look at it, if you didn't know that I relocated the battery and you put this tractor all back to stock, you almost probably wouldn't even notice at first glance that the sheet metal's been clearanced. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the battery into the tray, and I'll show you that we got some pretty good clearance between the seat pan and the battery posts. Okay, so now I have the battery in the opening, and as you can tell, it's got a fair amount of even spacing between the battery. This has a shadow, sorry, but the battery is a little bit this direction. But, you know, the battery tray is also not completely tightened down, and once you tighten it down, the spacing becomes nice and even. I'll have some vacuum hose, like I said, in reference on the edges, in reference to protecting the side of the battery. When we actually take the hood, or excuse me, the seat pan, and we close it, I'm hoping I can get a good view of this. Let's see what we got going on. I can't really see what I'm doing. Ah, there it is. As you can tell, we got a lot of clearance between the posts and the bottom of the seat pan, so I really don't think we'll have any issue with that. I am going to make like a plastic cap to go over both the battery posts, so that way if ever we had a catastrophic failure, the battery jumped up out of the tray or the fender pan completely collapses onto the posts, we're not going to have any material issue. The other thing I'm going to do right now, I'm going to put the seat pan, the actual physical seat pan, on the tractor or on the pan, and we're going to make sure we have enough clearance with those bolts. Okay, so now I got the seat pan in place. Let's see where those bolts all lie. And get back underneath this thing, get it to refocus, and there we are. All right, finally, sorry. So the bolts for the actual seat pan are way up. Not going to have any clearance issues with the battery whatsoever. So I'm going to call this part of the project installed and done. All right, on to the next portion. Okay, the second thing I'm doing today is I am going to modify the steering shaft. And the reason why I'm modifying the steering shaft is this. The 857 or those wheel horse tractors in that year have a steering shaft to me that looks just too short. In other words, the steering wheel is so close to the steering, or excuse me, the tower, the sheet metal tower, and the aluminum dash. I just never liked the look of it. So I want to raise the steering wheel up about 3/4 of an inch so it looks a little bit more, I don't know, visually it just looks better. It's my little thing. You probably might disagree, and that's fine. So the 857 shaft is right here. I picked up this other shaft off, I think it's off like a C195 or something to that effect, but it's longer, as you can tell. And I've already made one cut. I'm going to make a second cut, and that's going to shorten this shaft enough that overall it's going to raise the steering wheel up off the dash panel about 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to just go ahead and cut it right there and bevel the edges, break out the welder, and weld that back together. And there it is, guys, all welded up and ground down. I cut it obviously, and then I beveled the edges, and then I welded it. I put it in a piece of angle iron to keep it nice and straight, and then I welded the deep section of the bevel, cleaned it with the wire wheel, and then just re-welded the outside, kind of giving it a double weld. And as you can see, it came out pretty good. You really, if you sandblasted and painted this, you wouldn't even know that it was cut and welded and extended just about 3/4 of an inch to an inch, somewhere right in there. It wasn't exact, but this is just going to raise that steering wheel up just a hair to make it look a little different, a little nicer. When the hood opens, it won't be as close to the steering wheel, obviously, because the steering wheel will be up, and I shouldn't have any problems. And it's let's see here, it's pretty darn straight too. I mean, it's hard to tell on the camera and me shaking around like a leaf. Jesus. All right, there we go. You know, and when we take a look at it, it's pretty straight. So we're not going to have any binding or anything to that effect. There is a shaft collar that goes on, and it is right here. And I slipped that on already, so I will do it here. So we know that it's nice and, there we go. Of course, now at the moment of truth, there we go. Yep. So it's definitely 3/4, and we're not going to have any issues with the shaft collar that goes underneath the dash. So I'm going to call the steering shaft and the battery relocation complete. I know you thought it was over, but I actually sat down and said to myself, I want to finish up this frame and get the holes for the motor in place. So I had done some previous layout for the Magnum 10, and I actually drilled the holes today. As you can tell, I had to drill a hole here, here, and there for the Magnum 10. These are the original K181 for the 857. The other thing too is because I'm using that low or thin oil pan, the drain hole was right here. It actually was so close to the original bolt hole for the 8 horsepower motor that it kind of like Siamesed into it. So I had to make the hole there. I did have to slot these holes a little bit because either my template was a little bit off or I didn't realize that I had marked them in the wrong spot. It's probably a little bit of both. But after I did drill all the holes, I did notice something. One is this section right here, this little section here was really thin when I finally opened up the hole for the drain. So I took an old piece of C-channel, I cut it in half so I could have this little edge, and then I welded that into place to give me the strength back into the frame right here. As you can tell, everything clears the steering system. So I'm just gonna pull this out. Let's get this up and out of the way and flip it over, flip the frame over so you can see what I had to do on the back side. All right, so in order to get enough clearance or get the motor where I needed it, the Magnum 10 that is, I had to shift it back. That entailed that I had to make these notches in the footrest bar in order so I could get to the lower screws or the back screws of the motor. So I just took a burr and I just kind of opened them up in such a way so I can get an Allen wrench to the socket head. Well, as you can tell, that really weakened the footrest bar underneath the frame. I mean, I took darn near half of the material out. So in order to rectify that, I welded this piece of steel in so I could just angle cut it a little bit so it can get around the factory weld, so that way I wouldn't have to mess around with that. But welded it in about 4 places here, and then when we flip it over again, I welded the bar to the bar right here. So that gives me a lot of strength. So this footrest bar is put back together. It strengthens the whole side to side. We have this piece right here, the C-channel bar, right in this area to strengthen up this area here where the drain hole goes. So the frame modifications are done, and it might even be stronger than it was originally, but that's what was needed to be done. All right, guys, now the video's over. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.